The Void of Dunmoore. In the small, isolated town of Dunmoore, strange occurrences had always been whispered about, but none more so than the rumors surrounding the ancient well that sat at the edge of town. The well, crumbling and covered in dark ivy, was said to have been there long before the town was founded, a relic of something older and far more sinister. The townspeople avoided it, their eyes averted whenever they passed, though no one could quite explain why. It was as if the well exuded a silent warning, a malevolent aura that sent chills down their spines. Elias Thatcher, a curious and stubborn man with a taste for the bottle and a penchant for danger, had always been intrigued by the well. Unlike the others, he was not content with half-whispered legends and vague warnings. He had heard tales from the town's elders, stories of strange lights flickering in the night, of unnatural sounds emanating from the depths. Some said the well was cursed, others claimed it was a gateway to another world. But Elias dismissed these as mere superstitions, the ramblings of a town too steeped in its own fears. One night, when the moon hid behind thick clouds and the town lay in a heavy silence, Elias decided to uncover the truth for himself. Fueled by drink and emboldened by his disbelief, he armed himself with a lantern and a sturdy rope, determined to descend into the well and discover whatever lay at the bottom. The night was unnaturally cold as he approached the well, its gaping maw seeming to swallow the dim light of his lantern. The air grew thick, and for a moment, he hesitated, a sliver of doubt piercing his bravado. But the alcohol numbed his fear, and with a shake of his head, he secured the rope to a nearby tree and began his descent. The walls of the well were damp and slick, the stones worn smooth by centuries of water and time. As Elias lowered himself deeper, the darkness closed in around him, the world above shrinking to a distant pinprick of light. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the silence was oppressive, broken only by the creaking of the rope and his own labored breathing. Just as his arms began to ache with the effort, his feet touched the cold, wet ground at the bottom of the well. Elias swung the lantern around, its feeble light casting long, wavering shadows on the walls. To his surprise, he found himself not at the bottom of a simple well, but in a chamber carved into the rock. The walls were covered in strange, grotesque carvings, twisted figures engaged in impossible acts, landscapes that defied the natural order. The carvings seemed to shift and writhe in the flickering light, but Elias dismissed it as a trick of the shadows. What caught his attention more was the tunnel leading further into the darkness, a narrow passage that seemed to beckon him deeper into the earth. As he stepped forward, lantern held high, he heard it, the whispering. It was faint at first, barely more than a breath of wind, but as he moved deeper into the tunnel, it grew louder, more insistent. The whispers echoed in his mind, not in any language he could recognize, yet somehow he felt he understood them. They spoke of forbidden knowledge, of secrets hidden in the darkness, of power beyond comprehension. Elias felt a thrill of excitement and fear course through him, the voices urging him onward, promising answers to questions he hadn't known to ask. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading him down, ever down, until the air grew thin and cold, and the walls seemed to close in on him. The whispering had become a chorus now, a cacophony of voices that filled his head, making it hard to think. The lantern flickered, its light barely holding back the encroaching darkness. The carvings on the walls grew more elaborate, more detailed, depicting horrors that made Elias's skin crawl. Creatures of impossible shapes, eyes without faces, mouths without heads, tentacles coiled around screaming, featureless forms. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern, the ceiling lost in the shadows above. In the center of the cavern, illuminated by the weak light of his lantern, was an altar of black stone, slick with some unidentifiable substance. And on that altar, something moved. Elias squinted, stepping closer, and felt his blood run cold. It was a mass of shadows, shifting and writhing, as if the darkness itself had taken on a life of its own. From within the mass, countless eyes blinked open, unblinking and unseeing, and mouths appeared, whispering in that same insidious tone that had led him here. Elias froze, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to flee. but his body would not obey. The whispers filled his mind, a tide of madness that swept away reason and left only fear. He could feel the entity's presence pressing down on him, a weight that crushed his thoughts and threatened to shatter his sanity. The eyes of the creature fixed on him, and the mouths twisted into grotesque shapes, as if it was smiling, relishing his terror. The darkness surged forward, tendrils of shadow wrapping around Elias, pulling him toward the altar. He struggled, but his limbs felt like lead, and the more he fought, the tighter the shadows gripped him. The whispers grew louder, filling his head with words that made no sense, yet filled him with a primal dread. He was lifted off the ground, his lantern falling and shattering, the light snuffed out in an instant. Now there was only darkness, and the eyes, and the mouths that whispered of things no human mind could comprehend. As he was pulled closer to the altar, Elias saw the creature's true form, a being that existed beyond the boundaries of sanity, a cosmic horror that defied all logic and reason. It was a mass of chaos, a writhing void of shadows and tendrils, with eyes that saw everything and nothing, and mouths that whispered secrets that could drive a man mad. The void opened before him, and he felt himself being drawn into it, consumed by the darkness that promised to swallow him whole. Elias tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. His mind shattered as the entity's presence invaded his thoughts, filling him with an unbearable terror. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was the infinite hungry eyes of the creature, and the mouths that twisted into a silent, mocking grin. Days later, when the townspeople noticed Elias had vanished, they found the well undisturbed, its ancient stones as cold and unyielding as ever. But those who lingered too close swore they could hear a faint whispering, like a voice calling from the depths, beckoning them to come closer, to descend into the darkness and join the whispers in the void. The well remained, a silent sentinel over the secrets of Dunmoore, a portal to an unspeakable terror that hungered for the next fool to heed its call. And as the years passed, the stories of the well grew darker, the whispers louder, until the town itself was swallowed by the shadows, forgotten by the world above, lost to the endless whispering void.